One of the major funders of supportive services and supportive housing is IDHS, the Bureau of Homeless Services and Supportive Housing. So we would like to turn it over to Brenda Hanbury and Mary Sue Cox to talk a little bit about IDHS and the role that documentation plays and kind of what they expect to see from grantees. So Mary Sue and Brenda?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I personally want to thank SHPA for conducting these webinars. I think they will be extremely helpful to our program, especially knowing the amount of turnover that we have within our program areas. And the idea that we can now put this online, have it available to everyone at your convenience is a great tool that we're all going to be able to access and use. Today I'd like to talk briefly about the role of documentation within our Department of Human Services. As many of you well know, we are struggling this year with our budget. We're struggling this year with our budgets for homeless services, with homeless prevention, and with supportive housing. And there is a new wave of project documentation that is called budgeting for outcomes. And I don't know if any of you have been in on any of the General Assembly's town hall meetings that they're having, but budgeting for outcomes is a reality. I recently attended a presentation done by the Governor's Office of Management and Budget and members of the General Assembly, and they believe by next fiscal year they want to have budgeting for outcomes in place. Now, for us in supportive housing, that's not going to be a difficult transition because for a couple of reasons. First of all, you have already been reporting quarterly on the website your outcomes to us. And I actually have designed those outcomes to make sure that we reflect what all of you are doing with the participants in the supportive housing program. So when you do your quarterly service reports for our department, step 16, where you report your services, is the key component for performance-based outcomes for supportive housing. And that's why very often Mary Sue will call you or I will call you and I'll draw something to your attention that will say, you know, this doesn't look quite right to me. And what we are now beginning to do is we take your quarterly financial report and we pair it up with your service report. And we look at how much money you've spent on case management in that quarter versus how many reported instances of case management you have. Or, for instance, if you are providing a mental health service and there is an expenditure of $10,000 in that quarter for mental health services, and we look at step 16 on your quarterly reports and we see 2 instances of mental health services, that is going to be a huge red flag to us when it comes to performance-based budgeting. So you really need to bear in mind that when you submit your quarterly reports, and I know you know this already, but your budgets are now more than ever going to be tied to those quarterly service reports. And of course, the basis for those quarterly service reports is documentation. It is your documentation that you do on a daily basis with your participants. And that is the crux the entire, that is our program. That is what supportive housing is all about. It's service delivery to our participants who have special needs or disabilities that then require them to have supportive housing. So I really want to emphasize that this documentation is critical for you as an agency to continue to receive your funding. As you know, if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. If it's not documented in step 16 in the program service delivery, then it's going to reflect that you don't need those services as an agency. And you also know that Mary Sue and I come out and visit you and do monitoring site visits. And client documentation, probably the thing that all of us struggle with the most. It is the, you know, we can work with you on a lot of different areas in trying to put your program together. But if there is no documentation for the services that you are delivering, we don't have a program. And it, especially now when we're under such scrutiny, we really want to make sure that that documentation, that you are getting credit for everything that you are doing and that your participants are accessing. So having said that, I really also want to emphasize not only is documentation necessary, but it will be the basis for continued funding, for reduction, hopefully no cuts in our programs, that we then are able to show it as a cost-effective alternative to other kinds of care, whether it be institutional care or hospitalization or treatment or whatever. This program really needs to be a very cost-effective, productive program in order to sustain no cuts or small cuts to the program. And I know this year is going to be very, very difficult for all of us to hang on to our program funding. So I cannot emphasize enough that from here on out, you really need to look, even before you submit your reports to us on a quarterly basis, you need to review it in terms of your financial report and your budgeting and how those things relate then to the documentation of your service reporting. When Mary Sue and I go out, you know, we will point out, okay, you've only served, like, you've only had 10 instances of outreach or something like that, when we're a bit of that. And, you know, there's someone's phone's ringing. We'll have providers and say to us, well, you know, we do more than that. And I say, I know you do more than that, and that's, you need to document that you. And having said all that, the other thing I want to make sure is, as many of you know, I'm going to retire in 5 months. I want to make sure that our program is in good shape, that we have all of our deliverables together, all of our program objectives and outcomes and project outcomes in place before we leave. And so I'm hoping that all of you will take a serious look at your documentation and make sure that you have this documentation completed and seriously reflect on what you do on a quarterly basis when you submit your report.